All right, thank you for joining us. Today is January 19th. Welcome to the Lee County Board of County Commissioners zoning hearing. If you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. If you could, Anthony, please start with the first case.
Sure. Good morning, Commissioners. Anthony Rodriguez, Zoning Manager with Community Development. We're going to approach things a little bit differently this morning. We're going to have the lead planner who handled each case through the hearing examiner process present the case to the board, and then we'll move through the agenda today. So Patrick Doty is first up. Patrick.
Great, thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Patrick Doty. I'm a principal planner in the zoning section and community development. The case before you today is REZ 2021-0009. This is the Camelot McGregor rezoning. This is a request to rezone approximately 1 acre parcel from Commercial District C1A to Community Commercial District CC. The hearing examiner recommended approval on this, and there were no public participants. Staff and the applicant are here to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. Any questions yet for staff?
Where is this? It's on McGregor.
So this is located at the intersection of McGregor Boulevard and Camelot Road.
I don't know where Camelot is. Is there a map?
Yes, sir. I apologize.
Yeah,
Yes.
I got that map here, and it doesn't show me where all this is.
It's going to be just south of Cypress Lake Drive, I believe.
Yes.
It's south of College.
What is the big crisscross I'm looking at? And that'll
That would be College.
orient me.
Pardon me?
That's College?
Right across from the landings.
Right
Yes.
across from the landings, Frank?
Thank you. That's, they could have written that in the,
Where Chibo is.
I looked at the next three little charts also, and it didn't help me any. I've only lived here 80 years, so I'm still learning Lee County, so don't make me fight to
With that,
figure out where the hell this is. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Would the applicant wish to approach the board? Okay, thank you. Any questions, applicant? We'll come back to the board for a motion.
Move approval, Mr. Chair.
I'll second it.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion, any objection? Motion carries, thank you. Next case.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Beth Workman. I'm a senior planner in community development. The second case before you is REZ 2021-00003. The name is SR82 Blackstone. The applicant is requesting to rezone the property from commercial and agricultural to community commercial. The size of the parcel is 9.25 acres. The hearing examiner recommended approval, and there were 2 participants of record. Staff and applicant are both here if you have any questions.
Any questions at this time for the staff? Okay, would the applicant wish to address the board before we call for public comment?
Available for questions.
Okay, great, thank you. We have 2 participants of record. The first one is Rhonda Fiesel. Please come forward. You have 3 minutes. Okay. Thank you. Good morning.
Morning. Okay, I'm not familiar with the process or how all this works, so forgive me if I'm not proper and correct. I live adjoining. My yard, the long side on the map, is adjacent to this property. We are at the corner, we're the triangle at the end of the cul-de-sac there on the left-hand side of it.
Big lot.
Correct. When we purchased this, this was not my intention to have a huge presence of commercial businesses. Right now, we currently have trees, woods, we feed squirrels, we have armadillos, we have bobcats that have slept underneath vehicles. We have a lot of wildlife is what I'm saying. It's rather quiet there right now. We do hear a lot of the road traffic, especially since it's increased, a lot of louder exhaust and so on. We've also had trouble with people cutting across through our property, ATVs and stuff, all hours of the night. That said, our concerns going forward as well as previous is the 7-Eleven was going to be on our corner, and they decided to move on the other corner because of access to Alabama. It's a private street. The neighbors there It's an older gentleman, and he could not be present today. He had surgery yesterday. He intended to meet here. I spoke on his behalf on the previous meeting. As I said, he's older. They have constant trash. He said twice a week at least he has to go up and pick up trash that blows out of 7-Eleven's property. He's addressed it with them. They do nothing. We had talked to the people before when they were going to put it on our side, and we requested at least a barrier wall to separate the noise, the traffic, and people coming into our yard from that business, also helping with the noise. I was told at the last meeting that it's not a requirement for Lehigh. I did point out that the 7-Eleven down the street did put up a courtesy wall. They were going to put up a courtesy wall, but when they moved corners, no one showed up, no one said anything, so they didn't do it. At minimum, we would request at least they put a fence between us to keep people out of our yard and the trash and all that. We also have a concern with the utilities. We know the people that are electricians for the LCEC company and also the water that's supplied from Lehigh. We currently have a huge water problem in our area with buildup on all of our fixtures. We have a black bathroom. Everything is white. We've been addressing this. They said they're 2 years out from improving the infrastructure on water to get better water in our area to provide us what we're paying for. We're also looking at traffic. Traffic is horrendous out there. Trying to get out in the mornings is really a roll of the dice every day, both on Alabama and on Blackstone and Grant. They have proposed, and I guess it's in the works, for Meadow Road to be opened up to help alleviate some of the traffic to connect to LECO, but I guess that's also a couple years out.
Ron, I'm sorry, everybody gets 3 minutes and your red light's on, so your time's up, but thank you. We heard your concerns, and thank you. And we'll discuss those after the public comment. Thank you. Next speaker is Christina James. Is there Christina James here? Okay, we'll come back to the board for questions or discussion. I have a question maybe staff could answer. What was this currently being used? I know it was commercial, originally it was already commercial district. What could have went there as a current state before any changes business-wise?
It could have been a regular, like, commercial retail. It could have been medical offices. It could have been a gas station and the uses. There's not much of a change from going from what is currently zoned commercial to the community commercial. The difference is that the AG2 is in there, and they want to use this whole entire parcel. And I think I have a, so you can see that the AG2 is in the green there along the western side. So they want to use that whole entire piece. And
So that before any changes today, it still could have been commercial.
C1A, you could have had commercial uses in there.
Do we know that today, if for the future use of this property, what type of buffer would be required between the residential and for compatibility between the commercial and residential?
Yes, we do. It would be a 30-foot buffer, or it would be depending on where the pavement is, it could be a 15 to 25-foot buffer with a wall.
Okay, so it would be a wall, would it be a landscape wall, or would it be a structured wall?
It would be an opaque wall with buffer in between the property line and the wall.
That was one of the concerns we have from one of the comments today. So, okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board?
No, Mr. Chairman, you hit on my question. I saw in the hearing examiner's record that, the LDC, or the LEED plan protects the existing residential by imposing enhanced setback, open space buffering, and lighting requirements when commercial properties are abut residential properties. And so that's kind of what I was hoping they would highlight, is how that actually works.
Great, thank you.
I think we have another case coming up where we're going from C1A to CC, and there seems to be a little bit more latitude there from a use perspective. Are we looking at that, and should we be thinking about it maybe a little bit differently as we make these conversions to address some of the problems that people have?
We did look at that. We analyzed that in the staff report and put in information on the differences between the C1A and the CC. Right. And there was slight differences in the uses, going from some intense uses that could be in C1A to swapping to an intense use in CC. So it's like kind of apples to apples. The LEED plan does have provisions in it to protect, abutting uses that are residential. And that is the screening and the buffering. And we have, right now, we normally don't have a development order, an active development order in under review. This one does. So I can tell you that it's a large project and there is a preserve along the eastern side, the southeastern side being proposed, and then detention running along the south side. And if you want, the applicant can come in and expand on that a little bit more. But we typically in a rezone don't have an active DO that we can kind of look at to see what's going on.
Thank you very much.
Does that help you? Okay.
Thank you. Any other discussion before a motion? We already had public comment. I'm sorry. We only allowed one public comment. Thank you, though, per person.
Mr. Chairman, I'm comfortable with the hearing examiner's recommendation, and I'll make a motion for approval.
Okay, we have a motion for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by the district commissioner. Any other discussion? Any objections to the motion? No objection, motion carries. Thank you. Next case, Buccaneer Estates.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Anthony Rodriguez, Zoning Manager with Community Development. Third case this morning is Buccaneer Estates. This is a case number DRI 2018-10001. This is a request to change the Buccaneer Estates Development of Regional Impact consistent with Florida statutes to extend the build-out date from March 12, 1989 to 5 years from the time of approval of this zoning action, and also to amend the approved Map H, to be consistent with the design plan for the mobile home park as expanded. The hearing examiner recommended approval, and this hearing as a development of regional impact is open to the public. Staff and the applicant are here with any questions.
Great. Any questions for staff at this time?
Just
Commissioner Mann.
curious, if we didn't extend this 5 years from today, when would it have expired?
I'm going to defer to the
I'm just curious, is this an after-the-fact thing that we're fixing, or what?
Is it 27?
I'll take an answer from anybody, and
Is the applicant? No, maybe.
see, I don't understand DRIs since they've been changed so dramatically from the legislatures, how these things,
When we came in to approach staff about getting a DO for the expansion, we were told this is a DRI. DRIs don't go away. Now, there's a build-out date, and the build-out date really is meant to deal with what are the impacts in the period of time of your build-out. So you look at what might be needed in the way of roadway expansions, intersection
wait a
expansions.
minute, you're telling me far more than I need to know.
Okay, so they do not expire, but we,
Apparently, you need this extended, so I assume by that it ran out or is about to.
they don't, the build-out date is meant for a period of time that you're now analyzing the DRI. We're now asking for an extension, so staff would look at, now we've moved that date out. Are there any further impacts that would happen now that they didn't look at for that 5-year period after 1989? Staff has determined that no, there aren't any, so we can extend this for another 5 years. And then we're in the process of getting a DO, so we will be building out and completing the process.
The answer to your question was 2022, this year. It would have expired.
It would be this year, okay. All right, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, would the applicant wish to address the board any further before we call public comment? Okay, we'll go public comment. Anyone who wishes to speak on this case at this time? DRI 2018-10001. Any public comment? We'll close public comment. We'll come back to the board for discussion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, seeing no public comment and the recommendation from the hearing examiner, I'll move approval.
Okay, we have a motion for approval.
Second it.
We have a second by Commissioner Sondelli. Any other discussion? Any objection? No objection, motion carries. Thank you. Next case.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Nick DiFilippo. I'm with Community Development. And your final case today is CPA 2021-06. This is a county-initiated map amendment. The reason for the request is to amend the wellfield protection zone update, or amend the wellfield protection zone map to reflect the updated ISO travel time contours for existing and planned production wells as required by Florida statute. Staff received direction from the board on August 17th, 2021 to do so. This map here depicts the updated ISO travel time contours as well as the city limits. These ISO travel time contours were calculated using a model that simulates the rate of movement of a pollutant in the vicinity of county wells. And then once these contour lines are established, they are correlated to a protection zone. And these wellfield protection zones are used by natural resources staff to implement the wellfield protection ordinance within unincorporated Lee County, and that ordinance protects the public's drinking water supply.
Question, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Mann.
Help me understand. I don't know the term ISO travel time.
Yes. So
Draw me a picture or refer me to a chart that'll make it easier. ISO, what does that stand for?
So those lines are created by that model, and it basically simulates if a pollutant enters our groundwater system, it tracks how long it takes for that pollutant to reach our county water supplies.
Or a pollutant?
Yes, like a hazardous substance.
ISO travel
Yes,
time measures pollutant flow underground?
yes, until it reaches our county well.
That's more than I understood before I walked in here. And this question I should have asked when we first directed staff to do what you're doing here today. Help me understand how we measure future demand for water. Overall, there are, I'm reading from our well fields, page 2 of 10. Overall, there are about 4,077 acres being added and 6,000 acres being removed from Lee County's wellfield protection zone. Give me a try for a 25 words or less summary of how we measure, and what are we doing when I'm taking 6,000 acres away that we used to be able to drill wells in? We're not going to now, but we're adding these 4,000 acres. Is that part of what's happening here?
So part of it is the model is new, so it's taking into account the withdrawal rates that are permitted for each one of these wells. So those have changed over the years. So that is part of that. And the other part is some of the wells are being removed and new wells are being added. And based on the withdrawal rates, the contour lines are smaller. Does that make sense?
No.
Lee, do you?
How do we measure the long-term demand? How do we know when Lee County is going to run out of water, or will we never run out of water?
For the record, Lee Worst, Natural Resources. What we do is we have a plan that is in place that goes, actually Lee County Utilities does, that goes through the year 2040 and looks at predictions, and it looks at proposed demands all the way through. That is along with the permitted allocation from the South Florida Water Management District. Those are where we get our numbers to run this model. Hopefully that maybe makes it a little more understandable. These are demands that have been permitted by the Water Management District on existing and proposed locations of wells in Lee County. And the big thing about this model when it was run, we did the whole county this time instead of just portions of Lee County, unincorporated Lee County, the updates in the past. This model run was all of the utilities in Lee County. That's what is a very large effort that was put into this. And to understand isochlor, a contaminant is what isochlor is. And what it is each one of these, we look at a 10-year travel time, a 5-year travel time, a 1-year travel time, and a 6-month travel time. 6-month travel times are the shallow wells, the water table aquifer wells. I know you know about those. With that in mind, how long would it take if you dropped 1 drop of gasoline at a point to get to that well under stress, under its permitted stress? How long would it take for that molecule to get to that well? That's what we're talking with these travel times. Does that help?
Well, not in terms of my question about the measurement of ultimate demand. When when there's 1 million people here, what, 20 years, is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Will we have to alter this protection zone update?
Potentially, we're required to do it per state statute every 5 years.
But that's not, what we're doing here today has to do with this underground water flow of pollutants.
Correct.
And when that becomes an issue.
How, if it could become an issue, and if businesses of certain types choose to perform business within these travel zones, then they have to come in, because we've updated this now, because of new permitted allocations, the footprint of that allocation and how far that stretches out. If someone chooses to do business, let's just say a dry cleaner, okay? If that would make sense. And we are probably well aware that a dry cleaning solution is not good for the environment. But what would happen if a dry cleaner were to open up and say the 5-year travel time, zone 3, and they were to have an accident? We would permit them. We would then require them to monitor on an X amount basis, yearly basis, 6-month basis. We would have them monitor for those constituents in that 6-month basis in the event of an accident. And also we require them in their permit and their permitting process to notify us within 48 hours of a spill, so that we know what's going on and we can review their plan and get it cleaned up before it ever gets close to anything like this.
Okay, I think it's starting to
Come together?
yeah, in the sense that if I just read the headline of what we're talking about, well field protection has nothing to do with my question about future demand.
In essence, it does take it in, because some of these sites are proposed sites that will be constructed in the future.
Let me interrupt and tell you what I'm struggling with here, and I've been struggling with it for 25, 30 years. It goes back to my brief tour on the South Florida Water Management District Management Board. And I asked this question back then because we were routinely approving well requests by the big district. And I said, have we ever denied a request? And there was a lot of dancing. And what the answer that became obvious was, no, we never have. We have asked the applicant to modify their request based on, we think you're asking for more than you're ever going to need, and that kind of thing. But every request for a well permit that came forward through the big district was approved. And every application here gets approved. We never say no. And I don't know, and maybe, so I'm mixing demand and availability of water resources with protection of those resources.
Correct.
And so what you're telling me, even though we're talking about acres and acres that we're going to take out of where you can drill, and acres that we're going to add, we're still not talking about demand?
Commissioner, if I could, it all feeds together. Lee County Utilities is looking at demand based on population growth geographically throughout the county. So they're looking at subregions of the county for both water needs and sewer needs. So they identify where they need to be able to provide a certain amount of water to satisfy that growth level. That dictates, one, where they put treatment plants, but it also affects the wells to some degree, the source of water for the water plants. So when they're looking at well sites, they're looking at multiple factors. One is proximity to where they need to serve. One is the suitability of that particular area for the water that's available, which aquifer you're going into, so how deep the well is. So those wells are all critical to meet the demand, the projected demand. This update is related to trying to protect those wells once they're established by creating these zones around them in which you're limited to doing certain things. And this came into play with some of the developments we've had on Corkscrew Road, because there's a number of wells along Corkscrew Road, and there's limits as to what these developments can do within certain boundaries around those to try to protect those wells. And as Lee said, there are instances where some wells are no longer in production, so some of those come out, or the new modeling shows a different contour and shrinks that area. There's new well areas being established to meet the demand depending on where the geographic need is.
That's some help. Thank you, David.
You're welcome. Commissioner Sindelli had a question.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I struggle sometimes with models because I often wonder how accurate they are, how, the information coming out is only as good as the information going in. And one of the challenges we have, and I think this goes to where the commissioner was going, is that are we specific enough in a high growth area like we are, that our model reflects the challenges that we have here in Southwest Florida, so that that model is as accurate as possible. We struggle with models for number of homes, for roads, so on and so forth. And again, this update. So, and I think Dave answered part of my question, is that if we are in fact being specific enough in the model generation, then we should have some assurances that the water protection and those issues will be taken care of. That's the only thing I was concerned about.
If I may add one thing to that, keep in mind when all these wells were modeled under stress conditions, it is their maximum pumping capacity. So that's how you can be the most conservative and get the best idea on the quickest that molecule would travel to that well.
You mentioned 5-year reviews, and I've only been in this seat here a year and a half, and what's happened, it's just staggering.
Yes, sir.
I share the same concerns of going out. 5 years is a long time in the environment that we're in right now, but thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Nick, is this the end of your presentation? I could call for any public comment if there is any public comment.
Yep.
Is there-
I was just going to recommend that staff and LPA, or I was just going to say staff and LPA recommended the board transmit, so that's the end.
Great. Thank you. Any public comment on this item? We'll come back to the board for a motion for a transmittal.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to transmit and apologize for taking the time I've taken here. And I'll tell you, my conscience is relieved from my concern about the future water demands, because we're always going to have water, and if we run out of water, we'll just have more RO plants. You folks that grew up in salt water or lived in it for a long time understand it. It's just going to be that water will be far more expensive than it is today. You'll pay a water bill, it'll be far more than an electric bill, but all of us will be dead and gone when that occurs. So we'll let the next generation figure out how to pay for it.
Well, thanks for bringing that up. The demand obviously is a hot topic right now. If you see what's happening in the city of Fort Myers, where they didn't keep up with the supply and demand, they have wells, but they don't have enough capacity to supply the users, so you see a lack of water pressure out there. But that's something far from Lee County, though. And I just want to commend our board also and staff the last 5 years, because what you said earlier, Dave said about the wells on Corkscrew Road, is the changes out in Corkscrew, taking the agriculture away from the area with all the wells in the DRGR. We talk about millions of tons of fertilizer out of that, for the area. They're talking about the toxins coming through the flowways there. So all that fertilizer now is not going to be used out there. So, and all the pesticides and everything else. So that changes that well protection a little bit. So thank you. We have a motion. We have a second. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if I may just add a comment. As I'm understanding what we're doing today, then the well field protection zones are meant to protect our well fields from contaminants, not necessarily to protect them from running dry or anything like that. We're protecting the well fields from contaminants today. And the reason for some of the well field protection zones being removed is that those wells, for instance, here, removal of the waterway estates production wells, those wells are no longer in production and therefore no longer need to be protected from the contaminants. So that's why we're removing those. But we also have new wells that are coming online, and so we need to create new zones to protect those new wells from contaminants. And that's what we're voting on today. I agree with everybody who's talked about the supply and demand of water here. I recall that when we had our strategic planning session a couple years ago on the march towards 1 million by the year 2040, our assistant county manager, Doug Muir, at that time had assured us that we do have enough water for supply. But I think that's really a good update as we go into our next strategic planning session to see if they'll update us on where we're doing with that supply. But today, I feel comfortable with what we're doing as far as the contaminant protection on the well field protection zones.
Thank you. Any other objections to the motions? No objection, motion carries. Thank you. And we are adjourned.